Welcome to The Exchange with KB, with your host, Kirill Bensonoff. Kirill talks to innovators, business leaders, and other interesting people who share interesting stories of their success, overcoming challenges, and give actionable advice you can learn from. Visit KirillBensonoff.com and sign up for updates. Joining Kirill today is Mati Greenspan, a senior market analyst at eToro. You've probably seen Mati in the media as he appeared in Business Insider, Bloomberg, Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and other publications. He also co-authored the book, The Complete Guide to FinTech, Trading, and Investments. And now your host, Kirill Bensonoff.
Hey, Mati, welcome to The Exchange with KB.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you, man. I got so many questions for you. Let's start out with just a little bit of your background.
My name is Mati Greenspan. I'm the senior market analyst in eToro. I've been involved in financial markets pretty much my entire life. I've been paper trading since I was about 12 or 13. Been working in various online brokers for about 11 years now, and started working in eToro in 2012. Early 2013, I heard about Bitcoin. I was blown away by, the fact that we have this new kind of money, something that's free, fair, and independent of government and central banks. I thought that was just kind of a very unique selling point. And I've been pretty much on top of it ever since.
Cool. So you're in Israel right now. Did you grow up in Israel?
No, I grew up in California. I've been back and forth between Israel and California for most of my life, I suppose, since I was about 12.
And how did you get into trading originally? Was it just like a passion? How did you discover financial markets when you were young?
Yeah, so I used to be really big into video games, and I just kind of see trading as a giant video game where, you've got your basic interfaces, which are the charts, and then various inputs, like the news and stuff like that. And I remember there were a few video games when I was growing up where I just, I kind of beat the game. And I figure you beat the game in trading, then you get rich and you're set. So
that's a great way of looking at it. I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. And so are you focused 100% on crypto trading right now, or are you kind of across different markets?
Absolutely not. In eToro, you can actually see my public profile. If you go to eToro.com and you'll type in my name, you'll be able to see my public profile. I generally like to have about 10% of my total assets in crypto. That can vary depending on what's happening in the crypto market. But I feel like crypto is an excellent tool for portfolio diversification, which is what Wall Street is about to find out, that you have an asset class that is completely uncorrelated with the rest of the financial markets and has huge potential for returns. And this is just basically something that you can add to an existing portfolio, and it just strengthens the whole thing up.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned eToro. I mean, just for folks that don't know about eToro, can you give a quick overview of what it does?
So eToro is a social trading platform. And what that means is that basically everybody has their own portfolio, and you can see kind of what everybody's doing in percentage terms. Of course, you don't see the amount of money that each person has, but you can see what they're holding. So if they're holding on to Apple stock at a certain percentage, or gold or commodities, you can trade pretty much everything. And then if you like somebody, you can see their stats. If they've got good stats, you can even copy them with some of your money. So let's say you have $1,000, you allocate it to copy somebody else, and then that $1,000 will automatically mirror their portfolio.
So it's a great way for someone who is not necessarily a full-time trader or hasn't really been trading for a long time to get into either crypto or other markets as well. Am I right?
Exactly. It's like Uber for finance, right? So if you got some skills in trading, you can come on the eToro platform and get a following of people, and just like that, amass a very large amount of assets under management. If you don't know much about trading and you want to see other people do it and you want to piggyback off of them, then you can just come on. You can see who's there and you can copy them.
So let's talk about Bitcoin and crypto a little bit. I mean, what's most exciting to you personally? Like, what's most exciting about the space right now?
Well, there's always something exciting in crypto. I mean, crypto is just like all financial markets, I suppose. The money never sleeps. I'm watching the financial markets very closely. There's always, a story of the day or whatever, and crypto is no different. There's always some sort of drama happening, and the key is to figure out what kind of drama is going to actually move the prices and what is just kind of noise. So the idea is to filter out the noise and keep an eye on it just in case it translates into some sort of price movement. To answer your question, at the moment, we're looking very closely at Bitfinex. There's been some allegations from the New York Attorney General against Bitfinex that they've misplaced $850 million, and they took some of this Tether coins that they've created to come and fill that gap or cover up the fact that they were missing all that money. At the moment, you can see that basically people are pulling their money out of Bitfinex, and what's happened is it's caused a premium where Bitcoin is actually $350 higher when you're trading it on Bitfinex than it is on other platforms. I've been tweeting about this pretty steadily since it's been happening, and even updating what that premium is, because I think that it's quite important to keep an eye on. Is it $300? Is it $400? Because I think that that's going to tell how bad the situation is.
So you think this is? So let me just try to break this down
Sure.
for myself and for everyone listening. So the price difference is basically a premium that the traders are placing on Tether because of these or placing on Bitcoin as it relates to the Tether pair because of this controversy, right?
Exactly. So let's go back a little bit even. So a year ago, people were making allegations against Tether and saying that they don't have enough money to back up all of the coins. So Tether is basically a stable coin, which is pegged to the US dollar. So the sales pitch that they use is, you get all of the benefits of crypto, that it's free and borderless and uncensorable and everything like that, but none of the price volatility, which is something that is quite daunting for some people. If you see, an asset that goes up 100% in value or 1,000% in value and then crashes back 80%, then it's very difficult to use as a store of value. So Tether basically says, you know what, you get all those benefits of crypto, but none of the volatility. So each Tether coin is worth $1 US. And the way that they did that was that they said that each Tether coin is backed by $1 in their bank account. So we've been watching that play out for about a year now. And what I've always been saying is that this is really, for people who are holding Bitcoin, this isn't a concern at all. At the moment, there's about $2.8 billion that are held in Tether coins. The worst case scenario that can happen is that if Tether loses its peg, right? If they're no longer the market no longer agrees that $1 USDT should be worth $1 USD, then people will basically sell their Tether and buy Bitcoin with it, which actually sends the price of Bitcoin up. So it's not really a concern as much as it is something to keep your eye on, because if there is that kind of erosion of trust and people start ditching their Tether coins, most likely the price of Bitcoin will go up.
Do you think this is some kind of arbitrage opportunity? Let's say, and I presume it goes the other way as well. So if you want to sell your Bitcoin into Tether, you're getting Tether for less than $1, or is that not happening?
Right. So at the moment, and it's quite miraculous, Tether's peg is holding up exactly fine. So right now, $1 US is worth $1 USDT. When the state of New York first made those allegations, the price of Tether did drop. It dropped to about 98 cents, but it recovered very quickly. And now it's holding steady at $1 exactly. So it went down to 98, went back up to 1.01, and now it's holding at 1. The arbitrage opportunity comes, if somebody wants to move Bitcoin into Bitfinex, where where Bitcoin is trading at a higher value, right? So let's say you're holding Bitcoin and you're holding it at a place where you're buying it at a place where it costs you, let's say 5,600, right? And then you sell it on Bitfinex and you actually get 6,000 for it. So you've made yourself $400, right? That's where the arbitrage comes from.
Right.
But you're taking an incredible risk, because then you're holding Tether, right, on Bitfinex, which are two things that are very high risk at the moment. In case this thing blows up, you can kind of get blown out into the wind. So this is kind of also, if you remember what happened in Mt. Gox circa 2014, Mt. Gox went bankrupt basically. For a few weeks while people were watching this whole thing play out, Mt. Gox was trading about at a premium to the rest of the market.
So for all the risk takers out there, I mean, this is a great opportunity to take a huge risk and maybe get a reward. But obviously, everyone else.
I would not recommend this to even the high risk takers. This is a doozy right there. I mean, you're getting nickels for pounds of risk.
Tether has been through this before, and Bitfinex as well. What do you think? Just a personal guess or an opinion. Do you think they're going to get through this crisis and continue on, or do you think this one's going to kill them?
I hope so. I hope that they get through it. I hope that they're able to somehow regain the trust of the markets. If not, Bitcoin is going to be fine. The Bitcoin market is going to be fine. This isn't like Mt. Gox because, Mt. Gox was trading about 60 to 80% of all Bitcoin transactions when it went down. So that was a major part of the market. These days, the market is much more decentralized. We have 10 crypto exchanges that are providing hundreds of millions of dollars a day in volume. So if Bitfinex goes down, the market will be just fine.
What do you think? I mean, let's talk about regulation in the same vein as this. Nowadays, I hear some conversation about what type of regulation, if any, is good for the Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency markets in general, right? It's been a conversation for a long time, but now it's kind of coming to a head. So some people are saying, hey, the U.S. style regulatory, heavy-handed financial services regulatory might be good because then, we've got the licensed exchange or the bit license in New York State, where supposedly the government has done some due diligence on the company, and maybe my investment is safer with them, right? Versus like the libertarian or the anarchist conversation saying we don't want any regulation in the space at all. I mean, where are you at? What do you think is good for the space?
It's difficult to just there's no real rule of thumb. Well, I suppose if you want to have a rule of thumb, it would be that good regulation is good for the space and bad regulation is bad for the space. Just the word regulation is too blunt. You have to actually kind of go into what kind of regulation is there. So I think that a complete legalization like they have in Japan is kind of a good regulation. In other countries, however, they're kind of leaning towards banning cryptos. So those are both, both of those type of actions are considered regulation. They're just two different forms of regulation.
Sure. Is there any example like you see, I presume different places across the world? You mentioned Japan, U.S., Israel, other countries. I mean, we have Switzerland that kind of is Switzerland, Singapore, maybe Estonia, those sort of classic countries that allow some crypto activity legally, and then maybe there's other countries like China, as you said, ban it completely. Is there anyone that you could say like this is a great example of a country that does it right, or is there no one right now?
No, there's plenty. I mean, I think that Switzerland, for example, is a leader. France is doing amazing just because of the sheer size of their market, and they've come out very, very much in support of crypto assets in general. Malta, for example, Japan, South Korea is making headway as well. I mean, they kind of have to, given the bullishness of the people. Those are a few countries I think that are just kind of making some very good progress.
How is Israel doing? I'd love to hear about Israel and how the space is progressing there.
Israel is not doing so great. I mean, Tel Aviv is considered the startup capital, one of the few startup capitals of the world. We have a lot of startups here, some of whom are very big names and made very large exits.
Sure.
Waze, for example, Wix, Mobileye, just to name a few of the the billion dollar, like the unicorn startups that have originated around here. And there are crypto startups here as well, but they're having a bit of a difficult time. And indeed, it's even difficult to buy and sell crypto in this country. See, what happened was in 2017, around mid-2017, our dear Prime Minister was on camera and somebody asked him about Bitcoin. And what he said was actually quite bullish. He said that blockchain, and he explained blockchain technologies. He gave a pretty good explanation. He said that this is going to eventually replace the banks. He said, whether it's going to be Bitcoin or not, I don't know, but blockchain is going to replace the banks. And about 2 weeks later, the banks had implemented a blockade on all Bitcoin transactions. They did not like that at all. So now it's kind of playing around in the Supreme Court and whatnot, dragging their feet, but the blockade is holding. I'm not able to buy crypto with a credit card. If I wanted to buy crypto on the street or at an ATM, certainly I'd have to provide my ID and pay a huge premium or commission on that.
Is Bankor still based in Israel?
As far as I know, yeah. Our CEO and co-founder Yoni Assia is actually sitting on the advisory board of Bankor.
Very nice. Yeah, I read and heard about some accelerators and some positive things that they're doing for the space. This was maybe a year ago. So
and there's a lot of bullishness, and the startup nation is still alive and kicking. I'm just saying, as far as from the banking perspective, it's pretty difficult, but the startup mindset is definitely here.
Let's talk about trading a little bit, because that's obviously where you're an expert. I mean, where do you think we're at right now in the cycle of Bitcoin and other crypto trading? Are we in the bull market, bear market? Are we still in the winter? Is the spring here? Like, where are we at?
Yeah, I would say about spring, early spring at the moment. The bear trend has been snapped. There's a long-term bearish trend line that had been looming over Bitcoin for a while. The 200-day moving average for the chartists out there, the 200-day moving average is extremely significant, and we've broken above that on April 2nd. So I would say that the crypto winter is definitively over. At the moment, we're looking at strong resistance around 6,000. Some would say 6,400, which is where the price stabilized from June to November. So a lot of people are looking at that as kind of a major resistance zone. But that's kind of, I would say, look, if we pass 7,500, then people would start to think, okay, we're in a bull market. But it also depends how it plays out. If we just jump there in a single day, there would be a larger danger of a retracement coming or something. A bull market is generally defined as an environment where prices are going continuously up over time and are expected to continue to go up in the future. So that's kind of a bull market. I don't think we're there just yet. I think that a lot of people have doubts about this. A lot of people want to see confirmation that we've broken above that 6,000, 6,500 levels before they jump in a bullish tone. But that's just looking at price. And I think that, if you're looking just at price, you're going to miss a lot, especially in the crypto market. During the entire crypto winter, or you called it the crypto winter, is 2018 to early 2019. During that time, and historically, for crypto, and even in other markets, when the price is falling, or after it's reached a significant fall, that is usually when the most type of development comes in any sort of industry. And I've watched it firsthand in eToro, because we announced that we were building a crypto exchange and a crypto wallet known as eToro X in 2017. While everything was exciting and while there was a lot of hype in the blockchain industry, during that time, during this whole time while the prices were falling, I'm watching us kind of build up this entire crypto platform, right? The eToro X. And I'm just before my eyes, I'm seeing the price fall on one side, but we're just building up the infrastructure, and a lot of other companies building up the infrastructure as well. You can see keywords on LinkedIn are trending for blockchain and Bitcoin. People who have development skills in blockchain are seeing massive wage rises because those skills are in demand these days. So you got to kind of look beyond the price and sometimes realize that the market can get it wrong.
Definitely. So you think now is a good accumulation period, and if you think people like the smart money, quote unquote, is accumulating, who do you think is coming into the market now? Is it more retail? Is it institutions? Who do you think is going to be driving the market in the next wave?
Yeah. So the last wave, I noticed, I witnessed firsthand that it was driven by upper middle class. People who've accumulated some sort of a savings account and they wanted to see some sort of a return on it, especially while the prices were moving forward and people don't always understand the best about how to manage risk. So people were kind of taking a large amount of risk on that. The next one, I believe, is going to be driven a lot more by the institutional side, and we've already seen the first hints of that. Last week, we saw an article about Andreessen Horowitz, who is one of the biggest venture capital firms in the world. They've funded some of almost all of the biggest startups that you've heard of, who eventually became unicorns. And they've just announced a $1 billion investment into crypto. So, that kind of money, even if you've got a paradigm shift, of retail investors, you're not going to be able to reach that. So, we
Definitely.
see a few other VCs and even asset managers coming in and discovering the idea of diversifying into crypto. That can do a lot of create a lot of movement.
Yeah, you mentioned Andreessen. It's so interesting because they are, prolific VC, and they've been in a lot of startups that we know. And I think recently they kind of forewent their VC exemption and are now becoming a registered investment advisor. So all of their investors are becoming RIAs. And I believe one of the reasons is so that they can make these riskier investments into crypto and maybe later stage company and so forth. Do you have any thought on that?
Yeah, I saw that. I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah.
We're kind of doing the same thing here at eToro. We're getting all of our account managers as much as we can registered to be licensed portfolio managers. That's also something that we see as far as on the European side that helps us with our regulation and stuff like that. And Andreessen Horowitz is doing it for a totally different reason. What they're basically saying is that if each of their employees, and that's not just the account managers, that every single employee has a license to trade, then they'll be able to free up more capital for some of those projects that the government deems more risky. So the way it works is that qualified investors, or anybody who's classified as a qualified investor, basically is allowed to make investments that are a bit more risky in nature. So the regulator basically steps back and says, okay, you're a big boy, you know what you're doing, go ahead and make your own decisions, and we're not going to step in. The regulators are generally there to protect the general public, people who don't necessarily know about investments, from taking on too much risk or from falling prey to scams. So when you have a trader's license, that basically allows you to make more well-informed decisions without having the regulator step in and saying, no, oh, no, you can't do that. So basically what Andreessen Horowitz did was freaking brilliant. Is just saying, okay, every single employee can now make these decisions, and we can basically allocate as much capital as we want to any project that we decide.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mark Andreessen even said it's going to be like every other financial firm has one hand tied behind their back, and I think he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, I've already read a couple other firms are already following suit because they see the threat there, and I think crypto is a big part of it, and also maybe later stage like pre-IPO types of projects where they didn't traditionally invest, or VCs don't traditionally invest, but now they would be able to. What do you think about the general U.S. Or world stock markets? And for example, today we had some news out of I guess the China conversation between Donald Trump or his Twitter account or whatever that may be, and that drove the U.S. equities markets down, at least at the start of the day. I mean, what do you think as far as like what's part of the cycle are they at now? Are they sort of near the top, do you think, or are they still growing? Because we've had a continuous bull market in the U.S. for I don't know how many years, many years.
Yeah, it's tough to say. The average bull cycle usually lasts around 4.5 years. So we've just come off a twofer, right? We're just looking at 10 years of steady growth as far as the equity markets are concerned. A lot of analysts have started trying to call the top and saying, okay, look, trees don't grow to the sky and all that, and eventually we need to get into a bear market. But if you think about what's driving the market, you're gonna have to realize that the central banks of the world, so the Federal Reserve in the United States, the European Central Bank, People's Bank of China, the Bank of Japan, they've been incredibly aggressive, ensuring that there is a lot of money available for investors. They do that basically to support the economy, where they push money into the markets so that companies are able to borrow money. And then when companies can borrow money, they're much more likely to grow at a rapid pace. And it seems to be working as well. They've been doing this pretty much ever since the financial crisis. Among the 5 biggest central banks in the world, they've printed about $20 trillion. And $20 trillion may not seem like a lot of money, but if you think about it, we're on a fractional reserve banking system, which means that every dollar that's printed at the Federal Reserve in the United States is then lent out by local banks 10 times to 100 times, or even maybe even more. So that $20 trillion, the last estimate that I saw was around $2 to $3 quadrillion that they've created just in the last in the last 10 years, and a lot of that just it just parks itself into the stock market. Because financial institutions, they'll borrow money. Interest rates are really low. You got to pay like 0.5% or 1% on $1 billion. You can take that a $1 billion loan, pay nothing on it, stick it into the stock market. That's going to give you an average return of about 10%. But that's just good business. So as far as I can see, I mean, yeah, there are flaws in the system, but liquidity isn't one of them. And, there's an endless amount of capital that can still be pushed into these markets.
I just actually read an article recently, Warren Buffett's interview, and he mentioned something along the same lines. He's basically saying that interest rates are so cheap and we're not near the top if they stay this cheap. And I think that what you just described, the way that central banks operate, I mean, that's a stark difference to the way Bitcoin is designed, for example, right? Where it's where there's a limited supply and the supply gradually goes down. Do you think that, I mean, is that a more sophisticated design? Do you think a country could function with something like a Bitcoin as its reserve currency, or no?
Oh, that would be so awesome, I think. Yeah, what scares me about the current financial system is exactly what you said. I mean, that they can pump so much money in, and Bitcoin is something that's more limited supply. Alan Greenspan, who's you might recognize his name, but I actually have no relation to him. He was on camera saying recently, okay, the U.S. government can actually print an unlimited amount of money. He said that they can take on an unlimited amount of debt because they can always print enough money to pay it back. Now, I think people who live in Venezuela or Zimbabwe, are just doing a giant face palm when they heard that one, because when you increase the supply of anything enough, eventually the demand is going to go down. And what scares me is some sort of a situation where we see hyperinflation, and I'm glad that we haven't seen it any sort of inflation so far. I don't really understand why we haven't seen inflation so far. So it's actually one of the biggest economic puzzles of our time, is with all of this printing of money, how have we not seen massive amounts of inflation yet? And the fact that we haven't is a bit of a puzzle, but it's something that concerns me, because what if it does start to come?
That's definitely a concern for me as well. I believe you have kids, right?
Yeah, 3 kids.
Nice. And do you talk to your kids? Are they old enough to learn about Bitcoin or money in general?
The oldest is 5. I suppose she's kind of starting to ask questions about how much things cost and stuff like that. I don't think she really truly understands where money comes from and stuff like that. I think I even understand it on some level. No, but I've had a conversation with her about it. Yeah, Daddy's got to go to work so he can make money to buy you stuff. I've actually just ordered a book called Bitcoin Money. It's a children's book that I heard about online.
By Michael Caras, right?
Yeah, Michael Caras, exactly. Michael Caras, he goes by the handle on Twitter, the Bitcoin Rabbi. And I actually met him on Twitter a few weeks back, and it turns out that I actually know his brother really well. And he was actually at my house once while I wasn't there, at my parents' house. He was at a party, and he showed me a picture. He was like, yeah, look at this. This is your parents' house. I was like, what? So that was pretty cool. But I actually saw the PDF of the book. I said, I got to buy this for my kids because I like reading them stories at night. And this basically just explains what Bitcoin is, why it's important, the entire history of money in a way that is designed specifically for children. And I'm looking forward to reading that to them.
Yeah, I actually just went out and ordered that today as we're prepping for the interview. That was a book that came up, and I looked it up earlier today, and I ordered it. I have a 6-year-old or almost 6-year-old son as well, so I'm looking forward to trying to see if he'll understand, and it's along the same lines as you mentioned. I mean, he asks where money comes from or what it is, and he puts some pennies in the piggy bank. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think that, teaching kids about Bitcoin, because I do think it'll be prolific, whether it's, I'm not sure if it'll be a currency or it'll be a store of value, but I'm sure it'll exist when they're older. So I think that's important. I think recently also in my notes, I have that you had a son, and at the time you're holding the Bitcoin Lightning Torch. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, the Bitcoin Lightning Torch was going around for a while. For those of you who don't know, the idea is basically that it was a single Bitcoin transaction that was over the Bitcoin Lightning Network, which is a specific way to send Bitcoins. It was started by a guy who goes on Twitter by the name of HODLONOT. And I've been speaking to him actually for almost a year now, back and forth before he started the Bitcoin Torch. The idea is that each person gets the torch, which is an amount of money in Bitcoin, and they add a small amount of Bitcoin on top and then send it to the next person in the chain, whoever they choose. So I've been trying to get it, like every single time the torch passed hands, I would go and say, hey, I'd like to get the torch and stuff like that. And then I originally, what I wanted to do was I wanted to send it around all the eToro offices around the world. I thought that would be pretty cool because we have so many offices. I thought we could do like an eToro around the world lightning torch. But then the torch was running towards the end. There was only like 20 passes left to go, and I said, you know what, we can't do that anymore. So I just kind of stopped looking for it. And then, as my wife was going into labor, a lady named Jonah Richman, who's I've been following her for a long time. We've been discussing back and forth. She's like, hey, Mati, did you ever get the torch? I was like, no, I forget about it. Then she goes, would you like it? I was like, what? You have it? She's like, yeah, here you go. And I was like, totally through the roof. And I was looking for somebody to give it to. And then, I just realized, hey, wait a second, let me hold on to this for another few hours and actually have a baby that's born, while I'm holding the torch. This is basically the torch baby. So actually we call him Torchy at home every once in a while. It's like a nickname that he's got. And we actually named him, in Hebrew, is Or Yesod, which means light of the foundation. Yesod is also has some use in the Kabbalah, which is a Jewish mysticism, which if you look it up is kind of like transferring properties or transferring let's say different attributes from one place to another. So I thought that was kind of really along the line of the Bitcoin theme. And the word or light is obvious, obvious for the torch, but my wife had this name in mind like 6 months ago. And I was like, I don't really like that name because I can't really say it because the term or is the R in Hebrew is very difficult to pronounce for an American like me. And I was like, and then once I realized, wait a second, look at that name that you've picked out towards how this child, came into the world. It's like, wow, that's just so perfect.
That boy will be a lucky man.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Awesome. Ethereum or Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
Price of BTC on the 31st of December of this year?
Anywhere between $100 and $1 million.
Nice. Most stable coin?
Oh, I don't know.
All right. Decentralization, centralization, or somewhere in between?
Somewhere in between.
Cool. Mati, thank you so much for this interview. It was so much fun.
Thanks a lot for having me, Kirill. It was a pleasure.
Awesome, man. We'll put up some links. We'll put up links to eToro and your social profile. So everyone out there who's listening, check out Mati's Twitter and eToro, of course. And we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Much appreciated. All the best.